Hello, Gravitrons. I'm more gravity. Let's play chess. Okay. Picked up a piece late here. Notice that the final blunder is probably the nail in the coffin, but after bishop b4, yeah, that is the final blunder. So what am I saying? Black is looking pretty darn good even after c4. We'll go over this. Let the analysis calculate. There we go. I played a really strong and accurate game. So did my opponent. This is clearly a determined and experienced opponent, and I was glad to have played this game against him. Okay, so you see his profile. Alright. Black gets this early, decent control of the center. White's ahead. It's mostly an even game at this point. A3 might be a bit slow. We're not sure if White's playing for some kind of wing attack, but it's not consistent with the rest of the play, so sometimes these things happen. Capturing on e4 for the extra pawn, it seems, except White captures on e5 and evens things out. On this moment, I had to take some time to think. I've got two pieces against my knight. It's being protected by only the b7 pawn. And as it is, if it's knight takes c6, b takes c6, bishop takes c6, check them, also losing at least the exchange on a5. Or sorry, on a8 here, on a8. Black can't let that happen. So that's what we know. There's a number of moves which alleviate this. One would be bishop to d7. Not horrible. If White wants to undermine the defender, it's going to cost him an attacker. Okay, I'm okay with that. Even if there's this serious pin on both the queen and the king, doesn't matter. This b7 pawn is holding it all together. And I guess so too is the queen on d7. So we're thinking bishop d7. The move I eventually chose, which was knight to e7. Those would be the main ways to approach this. I think other moves aren't good for Black. Excuse me, I have some case of weird. Okay, I played knight to e7. The knight's now protected by one of his own. This can be bothersome for an attacking side who wants a certain square in particular. When the knights are protecting each other, I call it symbiotically, like this. And my opponent wants to open up, let's say, the c8 square for travel somehow. It doesn't really matter how, but that's an important square for my opponent's attack. Then having knights covering each other's backs like this is difficult to plow through. Anyway, I played knight to e7. My idea was bishop's going to develop on g7. Or my opponent initiates exchanges, and then the bishop has other normal, more normal even, developing squares. After queen to h5, bishop to e6 is a good, solid, developing move. Also protects this square, the f7 square, for a second time, which was definitely needed, because of the strength and a number of white attackers. This is one of the moves that protects against some serious loss or checkmating on f7 that would have otherwise occurred. Kingside castle, pawn g6, and the queen must go back quite a ways. Taken. Well, let's look at this. Um, let's do free spaces, not taking spaces. H4 is an idea. That's definitely free. Um, E2 and D1. So the queen has. Hold on a sec. Also G5. The queen has 4 different squares to which she may flee. I think my opponent chose the best one at E2. Look, Queen D1 is like burying your bishop back on the starting square. She's much more powerful on E2, where she's protecting the bishop on B5 and also part of what is technically a battery. You wouldn't normally think of it that way, but it is technically some form of battery. She's on E2. She's putting pressure on E4. She has a lot of moves available, like queen to E3. So E2 is the right square. That's the square my opponent chose. I developed my queen to D5. This was like this is kind of like a ruckus move, a ruckish move. This was like a ruckus move. Okay, the queen's going to D5. She's going to start a ruckus. There's now potential. There's an attack on the knight on E5. She's right here in the center. The pawn moves, and all of a sudden she's attacking the square next to white's king. She's defending things on the C file. She's a battery strong on the G8 to A2 diagonal. This queen, there's no one thing in specific that calculates out to like a one bishop or anything, but she's there. She's right in the center of the board. She's starting a ruckus. Knight takes C6. Knight takes C6. I think this is better than pawn takes C6. Rather than allow a long-term crippling move on the C file with the C pawns doubled in quite a bad way, I chose instead to replace my knight with another of my own. C4. I'm critical of this move. C4 here. Not good. Look, first of all, you have a battery on this F1 to A6 diagonal. You're strong on this diagonal. Break that up, but C4 doesn't make. Why? You wouldn't want to do that. Also, that prevents some moves that the bishop might want to use to backpedal in case A6 becomes a threat. It's not a threat now because in A6, white can just capture on C6, and it'll be an even trade of material. But the one way or the other, this bishop is getting claustrophobic on B5. I do not like C4 here. When I'm saying you, I mean white. White has minor pieces still on the back rank. So does black, but one fewer. And C4's maybe you could say C4 and then the knight's developing to C3. Okay, that does improve things a bit. But I don't think C4 was the move. I would suggest for white here D3. Yeah, D3. I wouldn't play D4 even with the pawn still on C3 because white does white have enough? C takes D, queen takes D, and white's black. Black is better off at that point. There was an old introduction to one of the Fritz chess softwares. Might have been Fritz 8, or it might have been in other ones before it, but carried over. In those days, you played chess against a computer. You played chess against a computer software, and you owned the software. You installed it, and you knew how to install it and all those things. 20 years ago, right? Mea culpa. But sometimes in those chess software, the default was to have the human play as white. And as the pieces were setting up, sort of, making boom boppity noises at the beginning of a game, Fritz 8, as black, would say, black, black, black. Why am I always black? I, it's like on the tail end where that could even be PC, and now I think it's probably back into being okay in PC, but also, uh, you know, bemoaning having to move second. So I don't know, and the monotony of it. I shouldn't explain my jokes, maybe. Anyway, the Fritz 8 machine would say, black, black, black. Why am I always black? And it's true. Before you always play white against the computer. Why would you give the computer the first move when you didn't have to? Yeah, so you have to figure out how to give the computer the first move and then do it. That puts you at more of a disadvantage than otherwise. So I think that's more in the spirit of what the Fritz team was getting at. All right, Queen D3, because on this board, trade of queens is good. If I can get this pawn to D3 that kind of stifles and hinders and hampers White's development a bit. Be sort of like clogging things up on the queen side there. My opponent traded minor pieces on C6. I would. These doubled pawns are nasty, man. This is not a good thing for black. And then after a trade of queens, we see that these technically are part of the same pawn island, but for all intents and purposes, with these pawns on the C file blocked, black has more like 4 pawn islands instead of just 3. Pawn island here, pawn island here, pawn island, and pawn island. So black has some very serious pawn weaknesses to contend with. White has to catch up in development. Black has to create a safe king or use the move, the initiative, by not castling to reveal something important, something concrete maybe, and something important. I'm thinking here, what do we have? White to move. And what did I play? I played, bishop g7. I would play that again. Bishop to g7 on the long diagonal. There's some things for white to figure out, and black is now more able to castle kingside, or in some cases just to step aside in order to connect the rooks. Bishop g7 is a fine move. White will lose a pawn here. White, I think, is most certainly losing a pawn. This pawn, because protecting costs the exchange. Pushing is not enough after C takes B, A takes B, Rook takes B, but then we also have Rook takes A7. Except that doesn't work. That doesn't work because of Rook takes B1, and what's this you contend? Rook A8 check, and I'll get your rook. King moves to E7. Rook takes H8, haha, and then haha, haha, ha. Bishop takes H8. So sort of a lengthy maneuver that looks promising for white with this. I admit I would probably fall into this, or I don't, maybe not, but rook to A8 check. The king moves, and then the rook's here, but the rook's protected by bishop, by the black bishop on G7. That's interesting. Interesting. The black light squared bishop is pinned. And black is going to go through here and pick up some material. securing first his king safety, costs him the opportunity to win a pawn, but allows for bishop takes c4, and now some discoveries must be understood or calculated by both sides, really. h3, it's creating a look for the white king, but I don't know, man. The back rank checkmates don't seem to be the threat here, so perhaps white could make a move like rook a1. It's nothing flashy, it's nothing grand, but white has moves like bishop h6 might be a strong move in white's future, so I'd say rook a1 makes sense. What do we have from? Yeah, so the computer has that as it's almost as good as the top move. Negative 3.6 compared against negative 3.5. There's a number of decent alternatives here for white as a move. Now, as a position, this is not good for white because I have 2 points of extra material and more active pieces. More active pieces on the queen's side. It's just a simple tactic to pick up an extra pawn. Captures on c3, and when the rook goes, so does my opponent's rook. And as compared to here with black to move, these pieces are gone at the end of it, so white has incurred more loss than black. c4 is good. This is super strong. I mean, when my bishop comes to b3, we don't even, not sure we have a plan for white. That these pawns are that this pawn on c4 is protected by the bishop, so you can't really undermine it from black's side of the board, and that this pawn is protected by the pawn. You can't really undermine it from white's side of the board. The bishop can't be involved because these are all light squares. So just make a nice structure here with bishop b3, and my opponent went for this bad move. He's going to lose a bishop and a rook to a rook, and I have the extra piece and a good deal many extra pawns as well. It's an interesting game, a fun game. It's played out against practice, the practice computer. Okay. Alright, George. Yeah, so this game was quite accurate. No, that's good, George. You did well. Talking to my Sleth. My Sleth. Talking to myself. Alright. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you, Gravitrons. I'm more gravity. Have a great night.